What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Nightmare Road. I almost said Decon versus that. What is wrong with me? Nightmare Road. I am one of your hosts, Decon, and I am here with a very, very mysterious and astute SOS. I said it for you.
You did. Hi, Decon. Um, yeah, we're gonna go back to murder tonight because it's such a great topic.
Oh, wait, we
Um,
gotta do that thing.
yeah, yeah, crystal fog. I should have the fog machine behind me and everything else. But
And then people's asthma's acting up. That's a spooky background.
I know I finally got a background so you guys don't have to see my cabinets, and that way I don't
Oh,
have to clear off the top of the fridge every time we have a podcast.
I
So.
like the cabinet. It's more realistic.
Oh God, no, I know, but I love the background, so keeps it real, right? Anyway,
All
we're
right,
talking tonight
so
about
I was gonna say,
the
what do you got for us?
Mystic family murders. So
Whoa.
it's an interesting story, and this guy was pretty clever, but it ended badly. So his name was Benjamin Evangelista,
Oh,
and
that is a
yes,
horrible. That is a hor. That sounds like somebody that runs a freak show at a circus, and he mistreats everybody.
oh God,
And he has like a
uh,
long mustache that
oh, the
curls.
long mustache and all that. So yeah, he and his brother Antonio immigrated to the United States in 1904 from Naples, Italy. And I do have a picture of him, so I'm going to share that. Um, yeah, and so they immigrated to
I was way off. That
yeah,
guy
I
does
know
not look
he's
like it.
very clean shaven. I let you
Yeah, but
have the moment though.
let me see. Let's have a look at this guy. Looks like nothing is getting. If you're whispering behind his back, he'll definitely hear you. I'm just gonna say that right now. He
Yeah.
knows what's going. He knows what's going on back in Italy. He's like, all right, let's see. Hold on, give me a minute. Oh,
Oh,
they're
poor
talking.
guy.
They're talking about me.
Anyway,
My ears are burning. Like, I'm hitting up the
oh,
house.
you're terrible. You're terrible. Um, anyway, he when he immigrated to New York, like a lot of immigrants did, he changed his name and he changed it to Benny. So he was Benny Evangelista. And
What's funny is that he changed like the most benign thing about his name, and he kept a creepy last name.
Benjamino, I know. He and his brother moved to Philadelphia and they lived together for some time. And then Benny became um, interested in the occult. So this was just about the time of the spiritualist movement. So
Yeah,
for around it was around, well, I think 1920 was the peak of it, but that
yeah.
1904
I think it
die off
started. I think
back in the
I believe it started in like 1890s,
yes,
and there's where you had the traveling healers, and then you had, I mean, the Fox sisters
exactly.
emerged from that kind of stuff. So
Yes. So because he became really interested in the occult, he also claimed, oddly enough, that he was receiving visions from God.
ooh,
The two don't really mix. But anyway, um, his brother Antonio was a very devout Catholic. I mean, they're from Naples.
yeah,
And this really bothered him. He was really disturbed that Benny was making these claims. So they kind of had a falling out and parted ways. And Benny ended up, um, he was sent to live. So they were in Philadelphia, and Antonio sent Benny to live in York, which isn't that far away
yeah. I was gonna say
from
that's like
Philly.
right there.
Yeah, hour and a half, maybe something like that. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's not that
Well,
far. So
no.
anyway, while in York, Benny becomes really good friends with another guy who immigrated from Naples, and his name was Aurelius Angelino. So,
Ooh, that he
yeah,
sounds. See, I'm so ridiculous. I'm so stupid. Like I swear, I'm so stupid. I hear that name, and that sounds like somebody that when he's mad at you, he goes beep de ba ba de beep de beep de ba. You know, and Or if he's carrying stuff, he'll set it down just so he can go, and just,
So,
all right,
I
I'm so sorry.
for anybody Italian out there, we're really, really sorry. I
Sorry.
don't have
Okay.
a picture. I don't have a picture of
Oh, I was gonna say, let's look at this guy. Okay.
Angelino, but the men started because they're best friends at this point, and they kind of started exploring the occult together, like um, investigating like the world of dark magic and mysticism. They're really into mysticism, right? And so
Yeah.
they're super into this. But Angelino in 1919 attacked his family and murdered his twin sons with an
Oh.
axe. Yes. So, there's theories out there that their explorations into the occult may have led Angelino into murder, but nobody knows. Nobody knows. He was sent
Yeah.
to the Fairville State Hospital for the criminally insane in 1919.
Yeah, that's something that when you look at, especially around that time, you you do hear a lot of things where like somebody murdered somebody and maybe it was led by, the occult or it was the mysticism, but there's really no evidence because when you look at the movement of mysticism, there was, I mean, by that time there was hundreds of people in the city practicing and there wasn't mass murder occurring.
Right.
So yeah, I don't
So,
buy that.
right, there's theories that witchcraft and the occult and all that lead to dark paths, but I don't buy any of that. I think you're either a person who's going to go down a dark path or not. And not all, as you know, my thoughts are not all of that stuff is dark. You can use
Yeah.
it for light and
Well,
healing and energy work.
well, I mean, it's like voodoo. I mean, there's voodoo and then there's hoodoo, which are like two completely different practices, and then you have an individual who looks at the old worship of hoodoo, and on there they do require things like sacrifices and things like that. It's the darker part of voodoo. But when you look at a person that's already mentally disturbed, they want an excuse to commit the things that they do. So when a lot of people are
Right.
like, he turned to hoodoo and now he's killing people, it's like, well, he was already messed up and he just wanted a reason to do it. So
Exactly. I think those seeds of criminal behavior, some people just they're squashing them down, and it leads one little thing breaks it all open for them, and they can go
yeah,
nuts. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Um, so after Angelino is incarcerated in the state hospital, Benny ends up moving to Detroit, and he gets married and he has a
rough city.
family. So he's working as a carpenter, but he's never left the occult. He's working as a carpenter. He's a landlord, so he owns some property, and he gets into kind of buying and selling some real estate, and he becomes a self-proclaimed mystic healer.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, he was really infatuated with these traveling healers. He thought, wow, how cool is that? And he was also seeing dollar signs. The guy was really
yeah,
shrewd and he made a lot of money. And he was pretty clever. And he saw these like traveling healers raking in all these money off a tent, you know, evangelist kind of things. And he thought, I can be a healer. So he says, he hangs out a shingle and says, I'm a healer in the basement. Yeah. Well, and
it's
and so
so
and you have to remember too, back in the early 1900s, the whatever nationality you were, like if you were Irish or Chinese or Italian, you tended to live within those communities.
yep.
You didn't branch
It,
out a lot.
no, you didn't, and a lot of the reasons why was because as a community you weren't really protected because you were seen as a person who's basically they have no rights because they're not American. So a lot of the times the police wouldn't show up to certain neighborhoods, so people stuck to their own kind. And because also, I mean, the Irish wouldn't sell to the Italians wouldn't sell to the
Right.
Chinese. And so they just stuck. That's how you have certain, even now when you go to certain places, like for example, when you go to Little Italy and you go there, there's still a lot of businesses that the signs are all in Italian. There's like these elderly Italian people and they speak Italian or Sicilian, and then you're like, I'm lost, and it's like, well, you might want to go to the next block, you know, and
It, yeah,
and that's just the way it was. And what you're saying about, and this is what's interesting. What's interesting is there was a great book. What was the name of this book? It was published in 1930, and they were talking about how a lot of people would go to mystics and they would go to these medicine men because their medicine back then might as well have been mysticism,
yeah,
only without the natural, remedies. Like for example, let's say that you had migraines and you had people that had, they had white oak trees and they would shave off the bark because for those people that don't know, we make aspirin out of, you know,
right,
white oak.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So they would shave it off and then they would give it to you like folded up in paper. And they're like, well, just take this and chew on it, for a little bit. And when you would go to a doctor, I mean, the doctor wouldn't do any of that kind of stuff. He says, well, here's a little vial of mercury, drink that. And, the side effects is, you're going to start vomiting blood and you're going to start doing all these things. And, you're going to be dizzy for a couple of days, but the headache will be gone. So people started saying like, okay, what is going on here? So a lot of the people actually, the reason why healers made so much money is because people didn't trust the medical field because they didn't have your best interest, in mind. It was about, let's see what happens if we give them this because they were basically the test mice. You were the lab rats of
Yeah,
a-
yeah.
anyways, sorry, I went on a tangent. Go ahead.
No, no, you're right. So he became really well known in the Italian immigrant community for being an herbalist and healing people. He turned the basement of his house into like his mysticism center, right? And he actually got into like doing ritual dances and chanting like to heal people. And also he got into animal sacrifice to heal people. So that's along the line of voodooism. So it's pretty
Yeah,
interesting. So he was doing all of this stuff and he built up a huge following, but at the same time, he had some kind of shady real estate deals. And there was some people in the communities like, I've been to him like 7 times and he's never healed me. So I don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah, and
Okay.
and and, and with the real estate thing, I mean, what year was this? You said this was like 1920.
Yeah, 1920.
So 1920, you had the Italian immigrants are beginning to form something called Cosa Nostra, which means our. It's like the basis of the mob, and they're beginning to deal a lot in real estate. So
Well, in this, a little bit of this comes in there into the story, a tiny bit. So, a lot of
come on,
his
Lord.
customers were starting to feel, yeah, a little disappointed about the lack of the effects that they were spending all this money on. And he was charging them, I think at the time, like $10
Ooh,
per session. And in 1920, that's a lot of money.
yeah, you think people would go and work construction, and you would get paid $3 for the day. Now, so
Yeah.
think about that.
Yeah, so he had amassed a lot of money in not always shady real estate deals, but there were some hints that maybe not all of his real estate deals were above board. And then he's making all this money on this stuff that's not healing anybody. Now, did he have some knowledge in maybe herbalism? Probably a little bit. Maybe he picked it up
Yeah.
along the line. And sure, like there's a lot of things that I do that are natural path stuff to heal myself because I don't have a lot of trust in the medical community. So,
Yeah, and neither did
you
people
know,
back then. I mean,
yeah.
that was big. Mercury was big. Giving you mercury, that's ridiculous. And
Mercury and uh
also magnetic
oh,
healing.
well, cocaine. Cocaine was huge.
Yes, cocaine was huge for
Huge. And opium. And
they gave
opium.
you opium for pain. They gave you cocaine for what they called laziness syndrome. So which, the people that were this is what's interesting. The people that were healers, they would basically give you like a prescription with animal sacrifices. like, okay, you're supposed to like drain this chicken of blood, cook the blood, and then once it's cooked like a little broth, then you drink it. What is that doing? It's giving you iron, like
Iron. Yeah.
you're anemic. Now you're feeling a little bit
Yeah.
better. You're like, okay, in comparison to giving you cocaine, and then you burn out and you're a lot worse, and then you have to go back. I mean, that's how the big addictions started happening. They would prescribe you Coca-Cola, you know, 'cause, that's crazy
Yeah,
to think.
the whole thing is nuts. So I'm going to show you a picture of Benny's family. Let's see. Sorry, it takes me a second to get to it. Um, so, uh, whoa, sorry, I don't know what my computer's doing. It's doing all kinds of weird
No.
stuff here.
Well, while
So,
you do that, I guess I could talk a little bit about the chanting and the dancing. A lot of people think that it's ridiculous. Like, oh, this guy told me I had a chant and I had a dance. But a lot of those, like for example, with the chanting and the dancing, when people would get to dancing and once they got done, like you're supposed to do this for this long until you sweat, and then the sweating is coming down. It's making you sweat out whatever illness you had. I mean,
not only that, but that kind of activity builds endorphins and
yeah.
you feel better.
Yeah. So I mean,
So,
there's a lot of it. I mean, and I look at it through you know how I am. I'm not superstitious. So I look at it through the point like this is what this is doing. Okay, this is, and to a lot of people, I mean, especially to the people in the medical field, that was magic. Like it's just that magic garbage. Now shut up and take your cocaine. And without looking, you know what I mean. I don't trust the medical field that much.
well, yeah, I don't either. So I'm going to try to show you some of the the sorry that my computer went nuts and I lost what I had bookmarked. So I'm going to show you
It's
he
the
had
doctors.
these these weird altar and dolls in the bottom of this basement in the room, and it's how I am about dolls. I would have been,
Yeah.
oh hell no. So these are the dolls and that they found. Yeah,
Can you make that
they're
a
like
little bigger? I can't really.
let me see if I can. There we
Oh yeah,
go. So he had these weird dolls in the bottom of in the basement in this room that he did all this work in. And he also had, and they don't have a picture of it, but apparently these were kind of like, he called them celestial beings. And then he
yeah.
had like this giant eye in the middle of the room. That would have freaked me
That
out too.
those look like Santeria, like, well,
Yeah,
pure Santeria saints.
don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, like that, like the one at the far left, the one that looks like he has a little goatee.
Yeah.
That looks like somebody called San Simon, Saint Simon, who was like the bringer of wealth and all that kind of stuff. And then at the guy that has like the cloak over his head looks like Saint Lazarus, the patron saint of dogs. And yeah,
Oh,
that's all the only ones I can
interesting.
recognize. It's been a
Yeah, they're
long time
spooky
since I
as
looked at
hell.
that
I'm
kind of stuff.
sorry, but they're spooky. But they found
But yeah,
these,
those are creepy.
later. So let me tell you what happened. So,
I think I lost SOS.
um, when it was July 1929, one evening, and the friend of Benny's came over. His name was Vincent Elias. He came over to see Benny that evening, and there was a side door that goes down to the basement, and that's how he would come and go, and then all of the customers would come and go. So Vincent walks down the side door, and he sees Benny kind of next to his desk in the chair. So he walks over to him and realizes that Benny's head's on the floor next to the chair. So he freaks out. He was thinking to himself, boy, the house is really quiet because Benny had, I think, 4 kids. So he's like, why is the house so quiet, especially this time in the evening, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he raced out of the house to go get the police. Remember, nobody really had not a lot of phones back then
Yeah.
in homes. So he goes down, gets the police. The police come in, and they find Benny seated at his desk with his hands folded like in prayer. But of course, Benny's head's on the floor.
Without his
Um,
head.
Well, the head was laying on the floor near his feet, and near his feet were three framed photos of a child in a coffin. So it was discovered later that the child in the coffin was one of Benny's children who had died a few years earlier.
Huh.
There was no explanation as to why those photos were located around Benny's severed head. That's just weird. I don't understand that connection. And after seeing the body and this like ritual arrangement, the police went upstairs to look for the rest of the family. Everyone in the house had been murdered. Benny's wife was found in bed with the youngest child, Mario, who was only 18 months old. The mother's head had been almost entirely severed, and the baby's skull had been crushed. The three other children, Angelina 7, Margaret 5, and Jeannie 4, were found laying across their beds, also with the girls' skulls, or all of the kids' skulls had been crushed. And one of the girls had their arm partially amputated at the shoulder.
Whoa.
So this crime scene makes no sense whatsoever. It just doesn't make any sense. So there were no signs, and Benny had a lot of cash. There was no signs of a struggle or robbery. And the only evidence from the scene was bloody footprints leading away from Benny and a single bloody footprint or fingerprint on a doorknob. That was it. Remember, no forensics back this time. So, like I said, he had charged $10 for his healing and herbs and ceremonies. And a lot of people in the community were saying it was all bunkus, it didn't work for them, and people were getting a little bit upset. But when the police started questioning people, what they found was the Italian immigrants didn't trust cops. And they wouldn't talk to the cops, just like just about every other immigrant community, right? They didn't trust the cops. They wouldn't talk to the cops. So the cops were trying to figure out, God, who killed this poor family, you know? And they ended up going, I guess Benny had a lawyer that dealt with a lot of the real estate stuff for him. And the lawyer said, look, there were some people upset with Benny over real estate deals, but it was not to the degree that they would take out his whole family.
That they would.
Like, they may do something to Benny,
Yeah.
but not.
But they weren't
kids.
going to kill the family.
No, they're not going to do that. And so
I imagine. So what is this lawyer? Does this lawyer have a name? Because I have an image of a lawyer from
I don't know
from that era. I expect him to be wearing like a suit that's a little bit too big, so he kind of looks like a Gotham City goon, almost like Lori Lightfoot from Chicago. And he has like a pencil thin mustache. His hair is combed slick back, and he's flicking a nickel in the corner, you know, while he's waiting for clients.
You'd write some good movie scripts. You really would. So here's Benny's family, his poor family. I'm going to show you this picture. Everybody was killed. And there was another theory that he was killed by the mob. And the mob at the time was called the Black Hand. And there were notes found around Benny's house that threatened Benny. But police pretty much dismissed the theory right off the bat because they said usually the family's left unharmed. They couldn't figure this out. They're like, this doesn't make any sense because if it is at the time the early mob, well, I mean, this isn't even an early mob. This is mob. The mobs are really active. They said they usually don't go after the family. So they take out the person involved, but they don't. It's usually the man. They take the guy out, but leave the family.
Yeah, and they don't cut your head off. That's because of in Catholicism. Because remember that even though these people were criminals, they were very Catholic still. So dismembering a body, cutting the head off would be considered like disrespectful and sacrilegious. So a lot of mobsters, they wouldn't cut your head off. And if they needed to send a message where they were going to dismember you, they actually paid somebody else to do it because they didn't want to get their hands dirty.
Oh, that's interesting. So there is one theory that kind of resonated with me when I was reading through this stuff, and I went, this sounds more plausible than anything else. Remember Benny's friend Angelino?
Yeah.
So, um, 6 years earlier, 1923, and oh, so Angelino had killed his kids 6 years earlier, right? So he goes to the mental hospital, but he
Yeah.
escaped. He had escaped, and so some of the crime scene was reminiscent to what Angelino did to his kids. The almost dismembering with the axe,
Yeah.
with the arm. And they think that, wow, they're wondering if Angelino went to Detroit, that actually they're wondering if Benny actually killed Angelino's kids and Angelino went to Detroit to get revenge.
Oh.
The police were going, I wonder if there's more of a connection here than we initially knew, and they had gotten in touch with the York police talking about the crime scene, talking about Benny's crime scene, and they're like, huh, now maybe we had imprisoned the wrong guy. Maybe it was Benny who did the kids.
You know, and also that arm almost severed. That's somebody that missed. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and then there were when the so I guess they had enough forensics back in the day when Angelino's kids were killed, and they go back to the files and they're looking at the fingerprint that was lifted in Angelino's home. And the fingerprint, I guess they didn't run it at the time, or they didn't think at the time, or they didn't know at the time until they compared fingerprints from the crime scene at Benny's house and the crime scene at Angelino's. And the fingerprint at Angelino's house on the doorknob leading out of that house was Benny's.
Hmm.
But Benny was his best friend, and he was over there all the time. So who's to say that the fingerprint was put there the night of the murders?
Yeah.
So, um, anyway, it's hard to say. So, over the years, there's all these theories. It's the one of the there's another theory that there was another. So I guess it was like almost Benny had almost like this cult following, and they're wondering if another one of the mystics in this little cult following that he had wanted to do off with Benny because Benny was making so much money and no one
Yeah.
else was making any money. But again, why would you kill the family? That doesn't.
Well, it also depends what kind of what kind of like belief system you have. Because like for example, in a lot of African mysticism, um, they did believe that when you were to die, you would come back, and if you could come back inhabiting one of your family members and seek out revenge, so they would cut the bloodline. So
Hmm.
they not only would kill you, but they would kill your whole family, and then that's it. That bloodline's done. There's no revenge. It could be a lot of things, especially if it was that like a rival. I don't know what to call them, mystic, witch doctor. You know, it
I don't
depends what kind
know.
of.
It is one of the Detroit calls it the one of the most brutal and unsolved cases in their history of a mass murder, right? A whole
Yeah.
family being wiped out. That's usually solved. It's rarely that that's not solved. But because they went in every direction they could go in and they never could solve it. There was one guy, I think that they brought him into custody, but he was quickly ruled out because there wasn't sufficient evidence, and even then he didn't have like motive. What would his motive be? So there
Yeah.
was
Why
fingers.
would he do it?
Yeah, so there wasn't the only, I mean, the one that made the most sense to me is if Benny killed Angelino's kids, then Angelino escapes from the hospital and he offs Benny's family. Because who else would know? He had to have been somebody who knew about Benny's and his child who died. You know,
Yeah.
that's not a stranger is not going to pose him that way. How would he know?
Yeah, because back then somebody couldn't just look you up, so you had to actually know somebody, which is why I went back in those days when you wanted to divorce your family or you want to divorce your wife, all you had to do was just leave to the next town and they would never see you again because they just so with something like this, it's very possible. And also they were Italian, and remember what they say, the Italians revenge gene goes deep.
Yeah, well, I don't know. This is a good unsolved case. Who knows? I searched far and wide when I was doing this story, trying to figure out if they have any more evidence, anything else, and there really isn't anything out there. If
Nothing.
they have something, it's in a box somewhere in the back of a vault. Nobody. Uh-oh, I'm losing you.
Oh,
I
am I?
hear you, but I don't see you.
That's okay. Nobody wants to see me. I have a face for radio, anyways. So,
Well,
so,
we pretty much wrapped up this case, but
man, and the fascinating thing is that detectives back then, because everybody has seen the movies where there's like bring in the detective, and this is like modern homicide detective, and he walks in and he's like, no one move, and then he starts like visualizing. That was a big thing back then. Now technology and forensics is so advanced that now you can have somebody that just knows how the science works, and he just walks in and just starts taking pictures, and then he walks out. In modern detective shows, they have that. When the guy walks in and he's like, I'm visualizing the blood splatter is here. So they do like, no, that was a thing back then because they didn't have forensics. So the guy had to sit in a chair and stare at a bullet hole in the wall. And then he had to kind of like visualize himself. Like, how would I shoot this person? And he draw his gun, he draw it multiple times. It's like the bullet, wait a minute, this person, the bullet went up. So it was obviously a shorter person. So just things like that. That was the thing of back then. And I would like to be like if I could cash in a travel back in time token, I would like to see these detectives solve a murder. Could you imagine how like the blood splatter went up? So this guy dove to the ground and then drew his fire, and he throws himself to the ground and aims up. He practices it, just that. I'm stupid. I'm sorry.
yeah.
I,
But it's true. It's true. So much has changed that it's unbelievable. I don't know how anybody can really expect to get away with a murder anymore. I mean, I know it happens, but they're also usually really tiny police forces with no training. And they
yeah,
don't bring in the state police or,
yeah.
you
It's
know.
because ego gets in place too. Like they're like, should we bring
Mhm.
in the big guns? Nah, we don't need the big guns. This is our matter. And then
And
you
still
just like a
today, I cannot believe how much police forces screw up evidence. They lose evidence. They they destroy it. It's like, what are you guys doing? It happens everywhere. It happens everywhere.
should we call the should we call the police dog the bloodhound? He died last week. Well, I don't know what we're gonna do. Got hit by a
Pretty
truck.
much.
Oh man,
Yes.
the whole losing the evidence. There was this famous lawyer in Harlem. This was like 1980s, and he worked for the Cuban mob. The when the Cubans started coming in and they had all these businesses and they started setting up these illegal gambles, they paid off all these lawyers, and then they paid off the district attorneys, and then they started paying off all these people. So then the lawyer would sit with you like this, and he'd be like, "Okay, this is what we're looking at here, buddy. For $100,000, we lose the evidence." And I'm like, "What?" For $100,000, they accidentally lose the evidence. For 50,000, the witness looked at you and you were kind of blurry because you were too far away. And for like 10 grand, you get 2 years in prison and probation, and they offer you a big menu. So I wonder. Actually, I don't wonder. I know that nowadays, when somebody's like, "Well, the evidence was accidentally destroyed," we need
Yeah.
we just need to bring back those detectives. Flop on the ground. Look at what's going on. All right, that's it. Ah
Well,
man,
that's it. That's our case for tonight.
what a dark concept, especially with an axe. Anybody that's wielded an axe to chop down anything knows how heavy that is, how awkward it is. So with that poor girl with her arm missing, it's very hard to hit a target, as small as a head with an axe. Um, Man, it's so sick. Like you got to be a very special kind of demented person to do that. Anyways, now that I'm depressed, I was kind of in a good mood. Now that I'm depressed. Anyways, I was one of your hosts, Decon, here with the very fabulous.
SOS.
And this was another episode of Nightmare Road. And remember, guys, to always look both ways if you find yourselves on Nightmare Road.
Ooh.